Let's take a look at some of the different devices that you might run into when examining different network models. We'll start out with the peer. The peer is an end user's computer that usually functions as a server and a workstation. A peer is usually managed by the user that sits at it. So they manage all their own security and all their own network resources. A client is different from a peer in that the client will rely on the server for most of its administrative functions, and the server will provide the client with network resources as well. The terminal and the host go hand in hand. A terminal is what we consider a dumb device. You may have heard them called green screens or dumb terminals, and that's because they rely on the host for all of their processing and resource access. So the terminal is usually going to consist of just a monitor, a keyboard, and that might be it. Some of them actually have mice as well. So let's take a look at how these network devices are going to work in their appropriate network models. We'll start out with the peer-to-peer network model. In a peer-to-peer environment, there really are no servers. Each individual computer serves as its own server, sharing out whatever resources that user deems necessary. Now, this can be great for a small environment because there's no complexity as far as server administration and network administration. We just let our users kind of run wild and do the things that they deem necessary. Now, at the same time, this brings about a problem. The larger your network gets, the more obsolete a peer-to-peer network becomes. Especially if you're a network administrator, you really don't want to be running around in a peer-to-peer environment trying to individually manage each and every user's computer. Another problem that we face in a peer-to-peer environment is security. Each user will be responsible for managing his or her own security. Well, one user might know more than another user about security, and that can create a problem. So let's look at a method of solving this with a different network model. The client-server network model is probably the most common network model you'll see implemented today. Most of the time, you'll have a separate administration team for your network or your servers, and then you'll have your clients that will only have access to what the network administrator or server administrator deems necessary. Our server will usually have more expensive or higher-end hardware, and will probably have a server operating system as well. Now, servers will provide access to different network resources. Network resources can include printers, hard drive space, almost anything that a user might need to access that they can't do so from their local machine. We can see here that the client will rely heavily on the server's guidance and administration. In our next network model, called host to terminal, we generally have a very expensive host. Now, a lot of people like to call these servers, and you can kind of go either way with it. But when we hear the term host, we usually know that we have a very powerful computer on our hands. So we'll have our terminals connected to that, and the terminals will rely heavily on the host for all of their computing needs. So if I was a user at a terminal, anything that I did would be transmitted to the host and processed, and then returned back over to the terminals. Now, this offers a benefit over the client server because if you figure a computer's life cycle is about 2 years, we'll have to upgrade one big host every 2 years. On the other side, with the client-server network, we might have to upgrade both the clients and the server. So both the host terminal and the client-server networks are great. Most likely, when you see a network environment, it will have a great mixture of several different types of models. And we call this the hybrid model. And you can see in this environment, we have our host to terminal, our clients and servers, and even our peers sharing out their own individual resources. So this should give you a pretty good idea about our different network models. Next, we'll talk about physical topologies.